hearing some really good stuff out here. So now, never mind that you're part of a big crowd, never mind there's no microphones, there's no power. But it would be great if people want to volunteer. What you'd say to somebody whose car you just towed away that benefits them. Carissa, you didn't tell me this was such a shy bunch. Well, let me drill down on this a little bit. Suppose you've shown up to pick up your car. There's no car there. What's the single biggest thing you're worried about? Right, exactly. So now here's what they say to people. Your car's in a safe place. I know where your car is. I can help you get your car back. I get frustrated when this happens to me, so I know how you feel. So here's what's amazing about this. When we role-played the things that they used to say, it would always turn out the same way. You get angrier and angrier, even in role-play, and the other person would feel like deer frozen in the headlights and would want to crawl under their chair. But then, when we role-played the things that they now say, suddenly no one could stay angry. And this wasn't a technique that I made up. This is based on a known principle of behavioral psychology that goes by the lofty name of social cognition. What it means in English is we all have an instinctive friend versus foe reflex in the first 15 seconds that you talk to somebody. And as you know, people react very differently to friends versus foes. And so what you're doing is choosing words, because people process the words they hear before they process the meaning of those words. We're choosing words that trigger that friend versus foe reflex in your favor every time. And so, one of the things I want to start off with today is, how do you keep people from getting crabby in the first place? And were you able to see my nice PowerPoint? If you're looking at a 4-step process called reflective listening. It goes back to the 1940s. Most of us think that communication is natural. Thank you. Most of us think, make sure this gets my good side.
Try the other side.
Okay. And most of us think that communications is as natural as breathing. That we hear what people have to say, we take in with our great wisdom what they're saying and respond to them. In reality, good communication is a thoughtfully composed performance. And the first part of it is that you listen and give your undivided attention and then respond to them. But how you respond is very different when you use this technique of active listening that was created in the 1940s by Dr. Carl Rogers, the father of personality psychology. The first thing you do when you're doing active listening is you paraphrase what the other person is saying. Paraphrasing, which means listening to somebody, taking what they're saying and putting it in your own words and playing it back to them, is not the same as agreeing with them. But what it means is that what you're hearing and what you're responding to lets the other person know that you hear them, you're processing what they're saying, and it's safe to talk about it. And so, for example, I was up on stage in front of 400 people at a major university earlier this year, and I asked them what their biggest problem was. Their biggest problem was graduation audits. This was a distance learning school run by the state. And so what would happen was people would call up and say, "Hi, I'm ready to graduate." And then they would do an audit, and 2 weeks later find out that they were 2 credits short, and no, they're not going to graduate. And people have jobs waiting, graduate school. And so I had somebody come up on stage to role play this with me, and they did nothing but paraphrase them, and they knew that's what I was doing. So they came up on stage and said, "Your stupid school kept me from graduating, and I have a job in 3 weeks." And so I'm standing there saying, "Wow, you need to graduate. You've got a job. This is really inconveniencing you. Let's start looking at the options." And the person role-playing with me was standing there with that look of stunned silence on their face saying, "Hey, that's my line. What do I say now? I'm trying to answer this guy." Those are the kind of moments that I want you to start having. So now let's keep cranking up the heat even a little more. How do you get people to calm down when they're angry? This is the most important thing that I'm going to teach you today. In fact, it's so important that when I teach this in live training, I usually don't put it on a PowerPoint slide. I make people write it down because I really want people to get this. You're lucky because I did put it on a PowerPoint slide, but you can't see it. So what I'm going to teach you is 3 octane levels of acknowledgement. Most people don't know how to acknowledge somebody. And the only reason people ever get angry with you is they don't feel heard. They're trying to get you to see their view of the world. Have any of you in the audience never been an angry customer? I've asked close to 10,000 people this question. I've seen maybe 3 hands go up. They're all lying to me. And I have some friends who would love to marry those people. But the reason that you got angry was because you were trying to get something accomplished and you felt the other person didn't hear you. And so you puffed yourself up and said, I'm going to confront this person and make them pay attention to me. So here's how you suck the tension out of it. You choose the right octane level of acknowledgement. The lowest octane level is observation. There's no emotion. You're not agreeing with the other person. In fact, none of these octane levels involve agreeing with people. But what you're doing here is you're just observing the other person. You're saying things like, I can see this is really important to you. You're obviously frustrated about this. The next octane level is validation. Validation is where you're letting people know that their feelings are valid. And so validation always is spoken in terms of other people. So you say things like, nobody likes to wait for their project to be done. Everybody hates it when the lights go out when you're giving a talk. That's validation. Then the highest octane level is identification, where you're putting I into it. Now you're saying things like, I wouldn't like that either. What happened to you wasn't fair. And in fact, I'm going to give you a very special version of identification that I'm going to paraphrase as how to tell someone they're stupid without ever using the word stupid in a sentence. I call it the I technique. So when I was in computer help desks, one of my hardest calls was when people would call up and say, hi, I trashed my hard drive. Did you make a backup? No. And so what I'd say would be, I get frustrated when I don't back up my hard drive and I lose all my work, so I know how you feel. What I did was I just called this person an idiot. And they're listening to me, and they're not pushing back at me, and they're not getting angry. And the reason for that is I'm using a very powerful technique of psychology known as modeling. We don't learn everything from scratch. We learn things by watching other people, and we learn from watching them make mistakes. And so when you model behavior, then people don't push back on you and they don't get upset. So the next question is, what do you do when somebody does something that's so blitheringly stupid that you could never in a million years use the I technique? You can still say, I've seen lots of people do that. In fact, my wife's best friend, who was a police officer for 22 years, we joke that she's still single because she needs a better pickup line than you're under arrest. She told me once what good police officers say when they've got somebody in handcuffs in the back of a police cruiser, and I was floored when I heard this. What they say is, you're not the first person to get picked up doing this. I'm going to pick up 5 people for shoplifting tonight. Look, you did something stupid, you got caught, but if you learn from it, you're going to be okay. We'll help you through the process. The reason that good cops turn on the empathy is because the most unsafe moment when you're a police officer is when you have somebody in custody who doesn't want to be there. And so they're trained to say that, and they're trained to do that. And you can use that the same way.